So less than 2 hours to go until the start of play at Lord's, and another blockbuster clash between England and Australia awaits. So much at stake at the start of this Ashes series, and after losing in Edgbaston, the pressure and onus well and truly on England to get a result this week. Let's cross there live now and join Rob Jones. Rob, a very good morning.
Morning, Simon. Yeah, great sporting occasion here. England against Australia in an Ashes test at Lord's. It's a little bit overcast, it's slightly muggy, and I'm joined by two men who have won the Ashes as captains before. Ricky Ponting and Sir Andrew Strauss are with me. Andrew, it feels like a pivotal day, a pivotal test match this for England. History isn't kind to teams that go 2-0 down in an Ashes series.
No, I think that's very true, and right now it's the calm before the storm, but there is going to be a storm, both in the way that England are approaching Test cricket at the moment and also the desperation, so to speak, that they're bringing to this game. You know, they need to start this game well. They've sort of loaded the dice with fast bowling, and therefore they'll be very keen, I think, to win the toss and bowl here today. And if that doesn't happen, then they're behind the 8 ball straight away. So it's a massive day for England. Australia come in here. They've been pretty buoyant and pretty confident, and they've been talking it up quite a lot over the last few days. But there were moments during that first Test match where they looked under pressure, and England need to remember that and try and leverage that over the course of the next 5 days.
There were moments where Australia were under pressure in that first Test match. There have been a lot of plaudits about the way that England approached the game. Yep. But Australia pitch up here 1-0 up.
Yeah, they do. I mean, they did enough just to get across the line, didn't they, last week? And no doubt, and I'll back up what everyone said, they were under pressure at different times, but I thought they managed that quite well during the game. The way they started with their fields, trying to negate boundaries, seemed to work for them early in the game. I think they'll probably change things up a little bit tactically coming in here. We've got a lot different surface, as we can see behind us. There's a lot more grass, a lot more cloud cover this morning. I think they'll change things up, and I think England will probably look at the way that they played as well and probably just tweak things slightly. I don't think they can go harder than they went last week. They said they're going to come out and go harder, but I don't think they need to. I think if they can repeat what they did last week, that's going to keep them in the contest for a little bit longer. If they stay in the contest a little bit longer, then who knows what can happen at the end of this game.
We spoke before the first morning at Edgbaston about the heat of the battle, the Ashes rivalry. Are you going to play nicely with Ollie Robinson this week? Poor old boy just said well batted to Usman Khawaja as he walked off, and then it all kicked off.
Well, I've been nice all week to him. I haven't said anything personal to him at all. To be totally honest, I mean, this thing's been completely blown out of the water by, none of the Aussie players have said anything. It was picked up in the media. He spoke the way he did at his press conference after that night's play, and it's grown legs from there to the point where 6 or 8 different Aussies have jumped on board and had a crack at him from back at home. So. And I spoke to Brendan straight away after it happened, and he said, look, he plays on the edge. He gets the best out of himself by playing that way, and I'd expect nothing else in an Ashes series. There's no one asked for an inch, and no one gets an inch in Ashes cricket, and I was surprised that there was only that one little incident that came out of the first game. I think this morning, England 1-0 down. I think it'll be on for young and old this morning, more so than it was last week.
And that was the point. I mean, we always hark back to 2005, but it was like that when Steve Harmison was hitting Australians on the first morning here in 2005, that it wasn't up to you guys to go and check if they were all right. It was, we're in the battle now, let's not mess around.
Yeah, and I think probably contrast that also with once the game is over. I think there is a real feeling of togetherness and that we're going through a special occasion as a group of people. But on the pitch, you've got to play hard and you've got to earn the right to get on top of the opposition, and you go into an Ashes Test match with those expectations, that this is going to be probably the hardest cricket you will ever play in your life. And also that regardless of what you say, you will be judged on what you deliver. And that's obviously the challenge for Ollie Robinson and the rest of the England team over the course of these next 5 days. Bazball's great, but ultimately you have to find a way of getting over the line and winning, and especially when you're 1-0 down in the series. You know
this ground better than most. Josh Tongue, no spinner. Is that the right team?
Well, judging by the way that pitch looks right at the moment, it looks like the right selection. But of course, you are one-dimensional and you're putting all your eggs in one basket, so to speak. So I can understand why England have done it. We haven't got a brilliant spin option anyway. But that means that the toss is going to be important. And of course, for the England batsmen as well, if there is a green pitch, then the Australian seamers aren't too bad either. So it's going to be a challenge both ways. I think it's England's best chance of winning the Test match, quite frankly.
Andrew says there that England don't have an outstanding spinner to pick at the moment. Australia certainly do. 100 consecutive Test matches for Nathan Lyon. That is quite incredible.
Yeah, well, I think he said it during the week. That's a proper stat. That's something that he's really, really proud of. I mean, longevity is the thing I think that you can judge international players on. It's one thing to have, to do well over 10 or 15 Test matches as a player, but to stretch it out over such a long period of time as Nathan Lyon has done is quite remarkable. I mean, his record in Australia is what sets him apart from everybody else. We've seen foreign spinners come to Australia, off spinners in particular, and struggle, but his record in Australia is probably better than it is overseas. So it's been a remarkable career, and he said during the week something he's very proud of, to be able to walk out today playing 100 straight games. Yeah,
and 8th on the all-time list in terms of the most wickets taken. Do you think that, particularly outside Australia, he's not given the credit he deserves, possibly because of the man he's following in the great Shane Warne?
Well, it's interesting. You talk to all the Indian batters who we all regard as the best players of spin, and they rate him as high as anyone they've ever played against. So I think outside of Australia, he is rated really highly. He's not a headline grabber. He just does his job game in, game out, as part of a pretty special bowling attack, really. I mean, we highlighted during the Australian summer last year was Stark, Hazelwood, Cummins, and him in the same team. It's the first time in the history of the game that there's 4 bowlers in the same team that have taken over 250 wickets. So when you put Lyons a big part of that attack, and what rounds out that attack, and is what has made this team so successful over a long period of time.
When we look at this morning and what England might do toss-wise, you said potentially bowl, but what about the approach? Your style of captaincy, you had a way of playing. You had a top 6 or 7 that made big runs, and you knew how it was going to be. Do you think that Ben Stokes, if it comes to today and they've had to bat first, it's 390 for 8, he'll call them in again?
Well, that'll be interesting to see. I mean, what he has said consistently is he's not going to change his approach for anyone or anything, and I admire that about him. I think he's stayed true to it the way through the last 12 months or so. He'll continue doing that, but ultimately it does come down to you playing the better cricket and getting on top of Australia, and when you're on top of them, making sure you don't give them a route back into the game. And England probably will kick themselves and say, well, maybe they did that a bit at Edgbaston. So I think this is going to be a hard day to bat. That's the way I feel at the moment with the overhead conditions. So there's a good opportunity for one team to get on top with the ball today, but it is a 5-day Test match, and so what happens today does not determine the outcome of the Test match. But hopefully, for whichever, from an England's point of view, if they win the toss and bowl and get some early wickets, that early momentum when you're 1-0 down in the series is hugely important.
As for Australia, Stark in?
I don't reckon they will, no. Just thinking, the fact that they chose Bolton last week on a wicket that didn't look like was going to offer anything to a bowler like him, they've come in, they've had a look at that. These conditions this morning, I can't see why they would change. I mean, Scott Boland's going to be much more suited to bowling on that wicket than he was last week. We saw Stark in the World Test Championship. He was a little bit off. That was his first game in about 3 months. So the fact they made the decision then, I think they'll stick with Boland here. Knowing that there's a shorter turnaround after this game, they might think about then bringing in a fresh bowler for the next test at Leeds, but I think they'll go unchanged.
Just a final word then, looking resplendent in the red blazer, and obviously it is a big Test match this week, but it's a really significant one for you and the family. I know it's always a proud day for you, how Lord's turns red in honour of Ruth.
Yeah, absolutely, happening tomorrow, day 2, and an opportunity for us to tell our story about us helping families going through grief and preparing families for the death of a parent. So to tell our story, to raise some money along the way, and it's also always an extraordinary spectacle to see Lords turning red. So really excited about it. I'm just sort of building up, making sure I can still fit into my jacket, which is good, and really very excited and looking forward to tomorrow.
In a word then, you win the toss.
You have a bowl.
I think the same thing. I think Australia will do the same.
Gentlemen, thank you very much indeed for being with us this morning. Ricky Ponting was a winner here as captain in 2005. Andrew Strauss, a winner 4 years later. Will it be Ben Stokes or Pat Cummins who comes out on top this week?
We are getting closer to finding out. Rob, thank you ever so much.